If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So we start the video diary with the day before the meeting. I usually go out on my mountain bike, but it's been so wet this year that I've been unable to do so. So I'm going for a walk instead. And this is much more painful than any mountain bike ride I've ever done, because this Saturday Betfair failed to turn a market in play. And you're thinking, well, why is that painful? Well, because I started shouting at my screen and I put my back out. So I'm really struggling today, which is ridiculous. What a stupid thing to do before a major festival. You lay down all the plans of everything that you want to do, and then you go and put your back out. Doesn't seem a very sensible thing to do, really, does it? Such is life. But I'm pretty well prepped for Cheltenham. Every year I go through the same routine, which is I look at previous year's results, I look at the liquidity, the turnover, previous trading videos of the markets, try and understand what happened, why and when, and if there are lessons that I can carry forward to the next year. And every year I go through this process, and it's a bit like a footballer or a tennis player or a golf player practicing before a major tournament as well. You know, I know the layout of Augusta really well because I've traded it so many times, and I'm sure that a major PGA Tour golf player will know it as well. He knows where he needs to hit the ball, what he needs to do and when. And I do exactly the same thing ahead of a major meeting. So I get in that practice, and one of the reasons that you do that is a meeting like Cheltenham is unusual. It's so high turnover and so much going on within the markets that you don't get many chances to do them. So by meticulously recording data and videos from previous markets, I sit down in the week beforehand and just go over it again and again in my mind, so that when I turn up for the first races of the day tomorrow, I know exactly what I should be doing, why and when. So yeah, I feel very well practiced. I'm always pretty confident going to a meeting, but also slightly apprehensive because you never know quite how it's going to go. But I'm as well prepared as possible, so all of the known variables that are out there I've accounted for, and hopefully that will be sufficient for me to be able to trade the first day of the meeting very effectively. So I've now completed day one of the Cheltenham Festival, and it went pretty well. I was pleased with the start, didn't lose on a single race. However, the first race of the day was a bit of a struggle, and that's typically how it is when you go to these major meetings. The problem that you have is the first race of the day and the meeting has a long time to generate the volume and the positions that people are trying to put on, whether it's a bet or a trade, whether they're hedging positions elsewhere or whatever. But there's an inordinate amount of time in the build up to that first race, and as a consequence there's no sort of oomph in the market. It's very difficult when you're trading in the style in which I trade to be able to read that effectively. You don't get that build up of momentum, you don't get the feel of where the market is going, and as a consequence I always traditionally do badly on the first race of the day, and typically of the first race of a festival, and that's exactly what happened on this first day. Now I say a bad result, it was still positive, but as you can see, or you will be able to see in a second, it's very different from the rest of the results that I managed to get on that particular day. It wasn't a great result, but nonetheless it was positive, so that was a good start to the meeting. So you tend to find that most days follow this cycle. The first race of the day has 24 hours or more for the liquidity to build and for people to take their positions. And then we sort of go towards the feature race, which allows us to really go for it because there's a lot more money in the feature race and there's a defined time period in which we can actively trade it. And then we sort of tail out on the back end of those particular races on that particular day from there. But some of that will depend upon how the day went beforehand. You may have seen in other videos that I've done that certain results and combinations of results can create momentum in the market. And some days you get that, some days you don't. So those results at the end of the day tend to be somewhat reliant upon that. But generally, I'm very happy with the way that the first day went. I wanted a positive. I banged in a couple of decent results, which gave me a better result overall on the whole day. And I didn't make a loss, so that's a pretty positive start to the entire festival. I also spotted some behaviour and activity in the market that I think may replicate over the next few days. So I'll find out tomorrow if in fact that behaviour is replicating, and that will give me something to sort of hang my hat on to in terms of a trading strategy for the remainder of the festival. But pretty happy with the first day, and I'm looking forward to day two. So that's day 2 now over, and that went pretty well. It went better than the first day, which is great. You see a nice upward trajectory. I can only just about say that. But when you look at the results at the end of this video, you'll notice that there was something unusual about it, and that was that the feature race of the day, which I'm always get really excited about, was actually quite a poor result. You look at some of the other results, they were pretty good, but the feature race wasn't very good at all. But there was a clear reason for this, and that was that it was at very, very short prices. Now I'll bring up a video as I'm talking about this, so that I can show you what that looks like, or I'll do an inset, or I'll find a way of displaying the information to you. But basically, when you get really, really short prices at a big meeting like this, it just gets absolutely stuffed full of money. So trading effectively is all about making sure that you take as much money out of the market as you can with the least amount of risk. And part of that risk is the amount of time that you're in a trade. So you want to open a trade, you want to close a trade, and you want to be in control of that. The problem that you have when there's very large amounts of money in the market is that you may not be in control of that. You're sat behind an enormous queue. That queue doesn't reach your particular order, and then you have to try and trade your position out, at which point it's already moved. So when you look at these very, very short prices, the queue sizes are just that much bigger, and it's much harder to call. You know, just as you think you're about to get filled, a large order comes in and slaps, you know, the price out by 2 or 3 ticks, and you suddenly find yourself in a difficult situation. So what you tended to find I was doing in this market is I was putting a position in, trying to wait for it to get filled. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't, but generally I was just repeating that process continuously, and I just couldn't get enough orders filled. It just wasn't working out for me on this particular occasion. However, I still managed to get a profit out of it. It just wasn't a substantial one. It was all about trying to do the best that I could given the situation that I faced. And it wasn't a great market, and you tend to find this on certain days. You know, some days the markets are exactly all the markets that you like, and some days they're not. Today I did better on some of the markets that I liked, not so well, including the first race, on some of the markets that I didn't like. And the feature in particular was a bit of a problem because there was just so much money in there. Because it was at such a short price, it was incredibly hard to trade. But I still managed to make a bit of profit onto it. So I reach halfway at Cheltenham, having not lost a single race, and fingers crossed that continues tomorrow. So day 3 complete, and it was an unusual day because first of all the sun was shining, and it's nice to see the sun at last. Thankfully the rain appears to have stopped this week for Cheltenham. Little bits of rain here and there, but generally not during the day. Conditions are much better than I thought they would be. But day 3 didn't go so well for me, and you sometimes get days like this. You're either perfect or a liar, and nobody's perfect. So, you know, it just turned out to be one of those days, and things just never really fell into place for me. The momentum wasn't there. I couldn't really get a decent total out of each individual race. It was still, you know, there was the odd highlight, but I was sort of, it just didn't happen. And sometimes that happens. You know, you've got to take things as they come, and you can't expect to be able to blast through every race. You know, one of the things I did pick up on was that the turnover was lower than the day before, and the previous 2 days, the Tuesday and the Wednesday, were up on last year fairly significantly. But Thursday wasn't. It just didn't really have the oomph within it all round. I'll go back and review the data next week and have a look and see if there was anything that I could do, but you know, it just didn't happen. And speaking to other traders, it was sort of a similar story for them as well. They just couldn't pull out any big totals. I say that, you know, everybody has a slightly different trading style, so some people do pull out bigger totals, and you can't sort of pretend that when you do badly everybody else does badly, because that's not always the case. But the general feeling was that it was a weaker day all round, the explanation of which I may not find until I look at the data, but nonetheless I still ended up just below the ground. So it wasn't a terrible day. It was just below expectations. And the most important thing is that on the last race of the day I was really struggling, but I still managed to pull out a tiny profit. I managed to pull out a tenner, and that kept the winning run going. So as we approached the end of day 3, I was beginning to think about, can I do all 28 races in profit at Cheltenham? I've done it before, More famously, I did it on BetStack in 2017, so 3 years ago, and they were obviously quite happy with that because they decided to run a competition around it. It just proved that you can trade on BetStack. But yeah, you know, that tenner on the last race may be a defining moment of the entire week, because it means that as I go into Friday, I've actually got the chance of trading all 28 races at Cheltenham to a profit. Have done it before on Betfair. The last time I did it on any exchange was in 2017. So to be able to do it in 2020 would be a real achievement. So I'm not going to talk about it publicly because I don't want to put the pressure on myself to achieve it. You know, it's a fatal thing to do, to invoke performance anxiety. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to get my head down and get on with it and see what happens on the Friday. But traditionally, the Friday is the best day of the week for me because we've got the Gold Cup. I did really well at the Gold Cup last year, and some of the other races are pretty good as well. And being the end of the week, there just seems to be this general euphoria in the markets on the very last day. So I'm hopeful that I can have a decent Friday. But yeah, Thursday was a bit disappointing, but the most important thing was that I didn't lose on any particular race. So that gives me a shot at winning an all 28 tomorrow. So the final day of Cheltenham has been completed, and how did it go? I'm going to leave you hanging for a little bit while we talk about the general characteristics that we saw on the final day. Typically, you would expect that the final day is the biggest day of the lot, and that was pretty much the case for me this year. The turnover wasn't quite where I expected it to be, but the overall trading conditions were pretty good. And the most important thing for me is that I managed to trade all races to a profit. So I managed to do all 28 races at Cheltenham in profit. And, you know, the great thing about that is I did do it in 2017 on BetStack, and I have done it before on Betfair. But as markets develop over time, you know, strategies and the market sort of shape changes a little bit. And therefore, you know, you do wonder if you've sort of still got it, for want of a better word. And you see people come and go over periods of time, and you realize that the market always subtly changes, nothing ever stays the same. So you always want to be reassured that you are still doing the right thing, and getting all 28 races right means obviously that everything is still intact. You know, there's still subject to what I'm going to say in a minute. The future is still bright in terms of the amount of liquidity, the trading opportunity, and all of those things. So that's great to do. And I live for these sort of moments as well. It's really nice to be able to get a good result. And on the Gold Cup, I managed to get over £1,000 last year on that individual race, and I managed to do it again this year. So 2 years in a row is great, because it took me so many years to reach that £1,000 mark. To do it 2 years in a row, you know, it was a fantastic feeling. But it's funny, when you look at races like that and you see the £1,000 fully hedged before the race had even started, you could be forgiven that somehow I'm using much larger stakes to do that. But in fact, that's typically not the reality. It's a myth. It's an absolute myth. The problem that you have if you lose, Freudian slip, if you use large stakes, is that you tend to influence the outcome of the trade. So trading is all about establishing a position, closing the position, and at that point you have to sort of think, well, can I do that again? So, you know, imagine you got a dragon sat on a pot of gold, and your stake size is equivalent to the amount of armor that you're wearing. If you go wandering in to his cavern and you nick a little bit of gold and then walk away, you've got the chance to return to his hoard and take another little bit of gold without waking the dragon up. However, if you dress yourself in full armor, maybe I should have hired some for this video, and you go clanking in there with your sword and you try and fight the dragon, then he'll probably eat you alive. And it's the same in the market. If you use a stake that's too big for the market, that makes you seen, then that will start to work against you. So one of the things, you know, I'm saying this after 20 years worth of experience. So I started with small stakes and gradually grew to bigger stakes, but they're not as big as you would possibly think when you see big results like the Gold Cup result. And I've learned that the reason for that is the bigger stake you use, my strike rate starts to go down. So I spend a lot of the time trying to hide from the dragon. I'm basically going into the market, putting some positions in, taking the positions out, and then I'm thinking, I can go back and get another gold coin here. So I'd much prefer to do that than to go into the market with a big stake and try and get some money that way. So I think that's an analogy that you should keep in your head in terms of how you should trade effectively, because it's something that I've learned to do after 20 years. It's not something that's natural. And when you're first starting out, it can be frustrating. If you're using £100 stakes, you're not going to make as much as if you use 500 or 1,000. And when we get to a meeting like Cheltenham, then I will start to use slightly bigger stakes, but they're still much, much smaller than most people think, because you've got much more time to walk in and out of the dragon's cave and to take a bit of gold. So if you look at the Gold Cup, excuse using the word gold all of the time, the liquidity was quite high the night before, and then it gradually built over the course of the day. So on the day of the race, money was coming into that particular market. And then as Cheltenham started, more money came into the market. And then as those first few races take place, people start betting and taking more positions on the Gold Cup. It could be to hedge a position. It could be because of something that's happened in prior races. I have done videos on this. But the activity on that particular race basically grows until it explodes in that last period after that previous Cheltenham race. So after the previous race at Cheltenham has been, the winner is known, then the true liquidity comes into the market and it really begins to take off from there. However, if you're looking at Wolverhampton on a Thursday evening or something, the money doesn't really arrive for a very, very long time. Certainly until they can see the horses and the horses are on the way to post, and then all the liquidity is compressed into that little period right at the off. So how you trade a race like that is very different from the way that you trade a Grand National, a Gold Cup, all of those sort of meetings. So my first position I took on the Gold Cup was first thing in the morning, and it was relatively small stakes. I was just prodding the market to see how it behaved. So I was sort of going up and just giving the dragon a bit of a shove and sort of saying, is he awake? Is he asleep? What's going on here? And then I was happy to sort of just do that to start with. But as time went on and I began to understand the behavior of the market a bit better, my stakes would gradually go up. And then the larger stakes that I would take would be at about sort of 10 minutes or so before post time. But even then I would ease out the stake before the race had started. So yeah, when you see those big results, it's easy to sort of get suckered into thinking that there's something magic going on there. But it's not. It's more or less the same thing that you see me doing on other markets, but for a much longer period of time and with slightly bigger stakes, but not stakes big enough that I'm going to prod and wake up the dragon that is the market. So yeah, bear that in mind when you see those. It's very easy to get seduced into thinking that there's some magic there, but it's not. I trade it in a similar way, but the characteristics of it are slightly different. It's... And you flex up and down. So one day this week on the feature, I couldn't get the trade in and out frequently. It was a lot higher risk for me. So that's one of the important metrics for me, is how easily can I get out of a position. And the lower stake you use, and the easier it is to get out of a position if it all goes horribly wrong. And it will go horribly wrong. And, I will lose typically about sort of 2 or 3 races out of 10. So to be able to go through Cheltenham without losing a single one, it's fantastic. If you'd have said to me all those years ago, hey Peter, in 2020 you're going to trade all 28 races at Cheltenham, you're going to profit on every race before it's even started, and regardless who goes on to win, it would have just seemed incredible. So it's delightful to be able to achieve that. But the way that you achieve that flexes in and out. I've often been asked questions when I've been posting the P&Ls up this week. Oh, are you scalping? Are you swing trading? Are you picking up on a trend? What are you doing? All the above. Because your role as a trader is to look at a market and think, what is this market going to do? How is it going to behave? How do I exploit that? What position should I take? How should I manage that risk in order to be able to get a profitable trade out of this? So there is no one answer. This is where people get wrong and confused with trading, is there is no one particular answer that you can generally summarize on everything. When people say, what are you doing? You have to answer, well, I'm trading. I'm looking at the market, trying to understand what it's doing, and I'm nipping in ahead of that effectively, and trying to manage my risk as best that I can. There's no one specific thing that you can say. And as I've said in previous videos and in the build-up videos, the market's generally going to be getting more volatile over a number of years. I feel like this year it wasn't, but I won't be able to tell until I look at the data, and I'm not going to do that till next week. Cheltenham's finished, I've done it, and, got all of the results that I wanted, and I'll analyse that next week when I've got a little bit more time to look at it objectively. So yeah, Cheltenham went pretty well. Last day went particularly well, but you sort of expect that. It's the highest liquidity day, there's the most amount of money in the market. Fridays tend to be better anyway, so it was great to be able to do that. And I got a slightly better result than I did in last year's record result in the Gold Cup, and 28 races overall. So I was pretty pleased with Cheltenham this year. Probably isn't a record. The stuff you can't see is I've automated stuff as well and had other things running at the same time. So you're just seeing a slither of what I did overall. But when you get a record result, it's because something unusual happens. And because I've been going for 20 years, I need a 1 in 20 year event for that to occur. And I didn't see anything, unusual this week. So it's increasingly difficult to get weekly records overall, but individually on things like the Gold Cup, you can target those specifically to do a little bit better. So yeah, it was a really good week, really happy with all of that. But, putting all of that to one side, as we went through the week, obviously, we had all these issues of football being cancelled, golf, tennis, and it looks like we're in, all of that. In a normal year, I'd be overjoyed and really looking forward to trading the Aintree Grand National meeting, but I don't even know if it's going to go ahead now, and there's no football to trade today. And suddenly, the outlook looks a little bit bleak for anybody related to the sports industry in any form whatsoever. So, who sort of knows where we go from here? I don't want to end the video on a downer, but, we're obviously going to be in for a period of time where there's a little bit of uncertainty. But my advice to you is that there will be as much opportunity created during this period of uncertainty as there are problems. And yes, things are going to probably be a little bit rough, but nonetheless, there will be opportunity in there as well. Can't tell you what it is, but I'm sure that will happen. And certainly for me, it's made me realise that if I can't trade Aintree and the US Masters at Augusta, Q1 is going to be a difficult quarter for me. And also, one of the issues that I'm going to have is that I've got no chance of hitting last year's target. I don't have to trade for a living any longer, and I do it for the challenge. So if there's no challenge of hitting that bar, I'm sort of thinking, oh, okay, that changes the year radically. Maybe I should be doing a few new things, or starting a couple of projects, or completing stuff that I said I would do for the last 2 years or whatever. So I'm beginning to look at it like that. I guess I'll have to sit down and think about it next week to try and make a decision about what I want to do. But like I said, there will probably be an opportunity out of it. And the financial markets are around all over the place during Cheltenham week. It was a bit distracting, to be honest. But I never really did that much on them last week. So I'm going to try and get my house in order and deal with that next week. In terms of racing, racing doesn't derive much revenue on a day-to-day basis from attendance or sponsorship or, hospitality. So it could be possible that racing will go ahead. That's pure speculation at the moment. But it's quite clear there's going to be a lot of other sports that aren't going to go ahead. And my thoughts go out to people that are going to be impacted by that, whether you're a trader, you're in one part of the industry and the other, hospitality, whatever. It's going to be a rough period, but it looks like it will be temporary. So I'm sure everything will come storming back towards the end of the year. I certainly hope so. If I do have a bit more time on my hands, I may be able to produce some of the videos that I've promised that I will do. So let's hope that I get some time to do that. But I've always got an endless to-do list of many things, half of which I never get to get through. So maybe I've got an opportunity to catch up on those from here. But certainly it's going to be a very different time of year. But to make sure I don't end the video on a bit of a downer, the great thing about Cheltenham 2020 is, it went like all the other Cheltenhams that have gone before. And in fact, the first Cheltenham I did £1,000 day on, I think was in 2007. I did talk about it earlier in the week on social media. So the fact that I can still do this all of this time later tells you that the markets are properly intact, that it's still possible to trade, because I'm still here doing it, which is a real positive. So when the markets do return to their full strength and we have some of these big features, I'm going to be right there doing the best that I can with it. And I hope that you will join me. But until then, I'm going to sign off, and really pleased with the way that Cheltenham went this year, and looking forward to talking to you again in the near future.